America, particularly in Cuba, reverberate here differently than they may in other parts of the country. But I do think it's been very instructive to hear the passion, to hear what our federal representatives are doing and some of the discussions they've had, to hear the perspective of Ambassador Trujillo, who was in this fight, I think applying very effective policies when he was in the federal government just a short while ago. And then, of course, Marcel and all the great folks that you've been able to bring together. So we're happy to be here. We are standing in solidarity with the people of Cuba, and I would say that this community down here is united, maybe like never before.
What would you like the Biden administration to be doing, and what would you be doing if you were president?
Well, I'm happy being governor of Florida, and so we're going to leave it at that. I'll tell you, probably the best. Do you want to tell what you said? Because I think you were very, very articulate about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor.
Introduce yourself to the.
My name is Rosa Maria Paya from the Cuba Decide platform. But what I'm going to say here is not from any platform. It's from the united voice of the exile community and the Cuban people that is demanding freedom on the streets right now in a very clear message. They are saying end with the dictatorship, and that's one of the main messages that we were asking for our elected officials and also from Governor and Lieutenant Governor to pass to Washington, D.C. Please support the demand for freedom of the Cuban people. How? First of all, no negotiations with the dictatorship. No one is entitled to say what the Cuban people is already saying in the streets, which is freedom and with the dictatorship. Second, the governor already mentioned it. United States has the capacity to provide internet access to the Cuban people. That internet access right now could save life in the middle of the repression that is taking place in the island, because one of the first things that the Cuban regime did was just shut down all the communications and the internet access. Second, targeting sanctions. There are criminals in power that right now are calling for combat, are calling for the military to shoot the people in the streets. They are killing young people. Just yesterday, 13 years old guy died in the streets in Las Tunas in Cuba. Fourth, why there are still so many enterprises doing business with a criminal dictatorship that actually repress the Cuban people. And when we are talking about putting consequence for those enterprises, we are not asking for any extraordinary measure. We are asking for the Sullivan principles, the same principles that were applied to South Africa to end with the apartheid. We are not less than the South African people, and we are demanding the same human rights that you enjoy here in the United States and that the Cuban people haven't had for many years right now. And in order to actually be solidarious with the Cuban people in an effective way, we are not just asking this as unilateral measures from United States. We are asking United States to be the leader of these messages, and also be a leader in our hemisphere, to please invite each democracy, all the sister republics of the Cuban people, to also take action, and those actions can be taken through the inter-American system. There are provisions in the European Union that allow the European Union to put sanctions against the repressors of the Cuban people right now. We need that leadership also coming from the center of democracy that is the United States, and we are hoping that they have the will to do that right now, but the Cuban people right now in the streets is demanding that change and that freedom.
I'll just reiterate what the governor.
Hold on, one sec.
I was just going to reiterate what the governor said for the Spanish cameras. Estamos aquí hoy reunidos con los grupos que ven aquí, los líderes. Estamos unidos en la causa de Cuba, estamos unidos en lo que es la democracia, traer democracia a la isla. El gobernador obviamente ha escuchado de muchas voces aquí, y lo que hemos escuchado de todos los diferentes líderes es que no podemos perder esta oportunidad, tenemos que pedir la libertad Yo creo que ya es hora. Hemos visto más de 60 años de represión, hemos visto más de 60 años de los títeres de Castro imponiendo su voluntad y ha dañado a la población cubana y no lo vamos a permitir. Estamos aquí dispuestos de hacer todo lo que podemos hacer, hasta incluso el gobernador ha dicho que está dispuesto a llamar a las compañías, de ver cómo podemos, con las compañías que están localizadas aquí en la Florida, proveer acceso al Internet. Yo creo que eso es uno de los temas, de muchos temas que se ha hablado hoy, pero queremos reiterar que el gobernador está comprometido, como siempre, con la causa cubana, con la libertad en nuestra isla querida de 90 millas de aquí, y que él va a seguir su voz unido con tantos líderes que están aquí hoy día. Muchas gracias.
Okay. All right.
I don't think I could have said it any better than what the young lady, Rosa Maria said. All those things, we need to do all those things. What we can do quickly is reestablish the communications inside Cuba. Cuban people need to be able to communicate with themselves. We certainly don't need to be talking to the Cuban government. We need to assert that the Cuban government's ability to access credit around the world. The reason why they have a credit problem is because they have a communist system that doesn't work, and they're broke, and they don't pay their bills. We need to help the dissidents inside the island by giving them financial support. And we need also to be a leader in the international community in condemning what's happening inside Cuba today, and has happened inside Cuba for many years. And we also have to be very clear about what's happening in Cuba. It is not about vaccines. It is not about food. It is about liberty. The Cuban people are fed up. And finally, one thing that a young person in Cuba said was, they've taken everything away from us, including our fear. And you know what? When the Cuban people no longer fear the Cuban government, it's the beginning of the end, and God bless you, and God thank that it is the beginning of the end. If that's the truth, it is the beginning of the end.
Well, I think you've seen. I mean, obviously, we have people here who were in the Bay of Pigs, and they remember the Soviet involvement in Cuba from the 1960s on. And now you have China, and they are involved in Venezuela. And oh, by the way, now is not the time to be taking away sanctions on Venezuela. That's going to end up helping the Cuban government. Obviously, it'll help the dictatorship in Venezuela as well. So I think that you have a potential for a lot of hostile influences in the Western Hemisphere, and that Cuban regime, that is the centerpiece of any malign actor who wants to be involved in the Western Hemisphere against American interests. The first place you go is to Havana, and you make common cause with them. And so they have caused, if you look at the Western Hemisphere since the regime seized power, Havana has been the focal point of almost all the problems in the Western Hemisphere. The majority of the problems emanate from there. When you see some of these other Marxist regimes, that has the Cuban dictatorship's fingerprints on it every single time. So it's that regime's existence has obviously been very devastating to millions of people's lives. It's been very hostile to American interests consistently for over 60 years, every step of the way. So what I think what's happening in Cuba is these are people that are rebelling against a communist dictatorship. They are not necessarily, we were talking about this, necessarily designed to be peaceful. They are trying to end the regime. And so that is fundamentally different than what we saw last summer, where people were burning down buildings. And this, unfortunately, wasn't happening in Florida to any large extent, burning down buildings, looting, breaking windows, targeting law enforcement, and all of those things. And so I think that people understand the difference between going out and peacefully assembling, which is obviously people's constitutional right, and attacking other people or burning down buildings or dragging people out of a car and doing that. So they're much different situations. And but what's going on in Cuba in particular, you know, those are not just simply normal run-of-the-mill protests like we would see here in the United States. They don't have freedoms respected there, whereas in the United States you have a panoply of freedoms that are respected. They are seeking an end to the regime itself. Well, look, I think if you look at what Rosa Maria said, I think she outlined a number of very forceful steps that could be taken to be able to stand in solidarity with the people of Cuba, and I think that those would be very much appreciative and could be done immediately. How this develop? Well, look, how this develops and how things would happen, you know, this is a very dynamic and fluid situation, but I would say at a minimum, if we're understanding the stakes, understanding why people are revolting, and we're siding with the Cuban people, you could probably get a lot of the policies right at that point. If you go into it thinking that they're upset about a vaccine shortage or they're upset that there's not enough groceries in the store, but they just want the regime to change a few things around and kind of rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, if that's what you think, then you clearly have no hope of getting a favorable outcome here.
Again, Governor, what is the Biden administration be doing?
He wants to thank you on
el
behalf
apoyo
of his.
incondicional que le está dando el exilio aquí. Yo hace 5 meses tuve que huir de mi país por
He
persecución
left 5
política. Mi
months
nombre
ago
es
because
Alex
of
Omar y
political
Manuel González.
persecution.
Mi pueblo no necesita lanchas que salgan a llevar comida, a llevar agua.
They don't need
You
food.
wanna translate it?
Por favor, exijan una intervención militar. Es lo que necesita mi país. Están matando a los
So for the
Frente Nacional de Resistencia, Orlando Zapata Tamayo.
so for the
Arm them now, because they're sitting ducks in the street over there.
So for the benefit of all, this gentleman said he left 5 months ago because of political persecution, so he wanted to thank the governor. He wants to reiterate, this is not about food, this is not about vaccines, this is about people desperate for freedom.
Do you want to, Marcel, any,
No dije lo que usted
you guys
dijo
want to
para-
make any more remarks?
Yes, look, with regards to the existing situation, the Cuban people have made their position very, very clear. They want an end to the regime. They don't want a reform of the regime. Any message coming from the White House or from anywhere that asks the regime for anything other than to leave is the wrong message. The Cuban people took their first step. Before we talk about any other military, we have to talk to the Cuban military and wait and see what they want to do. They could be the heroes of the new republic, or they could be the repressors of the last fallen republic. It is up to them. Now the eyes of the world are on them. It is their moment. This is their time. If they don't answer that call, if they choose to take the country down the path of bloody civil war, because it will turn to that. The Cuban people have spoken. They're not taking a step back. And if we look at the examples of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, once the veil of fear is lifted in these countries, you can't put that population back. That time has crossed. If the Cuban military does not act, then it might become necessary for the United States to intervene on a humanitarian basis. We might not be there today, but we may be getting there soon. What we can't not do as the United States under any circumstances is, as our heroes from the brigade have said, once again, betray the Cuban patriots in their strongest moments of courage.
Trujillo, Hart, do you want to say?
Thank you, Governor, and as always, we always appreciate you coming and visiting and your complete solidarity with the Cuban exile community. I think it's very, very clear now is not a time to retreat. And I think the one thing that the United States government could do is not start eliminating sanctions as they've already started doing on Venezuela. It's double down on sanctions and double down on diplomatic pressure. And that starts with identifying what this is. some members of Congress are already saying that this is because of callous sanctions of the last administration and lack of food and mismanagement. They're fundamentally wrong in their approach, and they will feel the consequences of having another failed leadership attempt in our own hemisphere. I think we have to be abundantly clear. This is 62 years of repression. This is 62 years of a totalitarian regime, and these are people who are yearning for freedom and democracy.
You want to say something? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thank you, Governor. I think that the message is very clear. And we, the elected officials at the congressional level, we have a united voice in the community, but one united voice towards the Biden administration. There are three things we need to do. We cannot negotiate with the regime at this hour. We need to provide internet. We need to make sure that the United States provides, talking to whatever organization that provides internet access, so we will be able to have the images of what's happening in Cuba. We know that the Cuban regime owns the Wi-Fi services and the internet access. If the Cuban people cannot upload what's happening on the streets of Havana and all over the island, there could be a major massacre of biblical proportions and we will not know about it. So once again, the United States has a historical role. We do not want to be once again abandoned, and we do not want the United States to commit treason once again that happened in Bay of Pigs. This is the second time this administration, the United States, has the possibility of saving the Cuban people, and it's in the hands of the Biden administration. We're all together, Republicans and Democrats, one voice, Americans helping the Cubans on the street, who right now have lost everything, their food, their families, their dignity, and now they lost the fear. So once a country loses the fear, we, the United States, the beacon of hope all over the world, needs to be there. Cuba is closer to Miami than Orlando is to Miami. We, as federal representatives, we're calling out on the Biden administration to side with us, to side with our community, my community, and with the Cuban people that are fighting for their freedom on the streets of Havana. Thank you.
You want to do that in Spanish?
Governor, if I may,
Spanish. What letter do you?
Lieutenant Governor, if I may,
Okay.
I think it has been established, widely established, we're all in favor of doing everything in our power for the internet to go to Cuba. But I believe that in addition to the internet, we need to take steps now to help the Cuban people at this moment and time. So it cannot only be focused on the internet. That's a more long-term thing in trying to get it, in getting all the permits and all that. But now, what are we gonna do now? We need to stand with the Cuban people. Now, in addition to the internet, Venezuela and Nicaragua has internet. And look at Venezuela and Nicaragua. They haven't been able to get rid of the dictatorship as yet. Thank you.
Just to finish up, to wrap up, just to reiterate what Sylvia said, en Spanish, obviamente, el tema del Internet, aunque es un tema importante para traer información, para traer la verdad, no es el único tema. Tenemos que asegurar que vamos a tomar pasos para de nuevo unirnos con el pueblo cubano, unirnos con lo que es la búsqueda de libertad que le ha huido hace más de 60 años. Así que, bueno, muchas gracias. Are you
right.
done? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right,
You-
great.
You're
thank you.
gonna do it in Spanish?
I just want to understand,
Okay.
give you a soundbite tan short para las emisoras en español. Todo lo que se ha hablado aquí, estamos unidos en una sola voz. Le hemos pedido a nuestro gobernador Ron DeSantis que esté junto con todo el exilio cubano y con los cubanos que están en la isla. Y le pedimos en una sola voz, empezando por la de él y terminando por la de Carlos Jiménez y una servidora, que somos los representantes federales de esta ciudad, que la administración del presidente Biden sea la administración que esté al lado del pueblo cubano y que no sea nuevamente una administración norteamericana la que defraude y traicione a ese pueblo. Ya ocurrió en Bahía de Cochinos, que no ocurra una segunda vez. ¿Qué es lo que necesitamos? Tres cosas en particular: que no haya ninguna negociación con el régimen, que esto no se trata del COVID, ni se trata de que la gente no tiene vacunas, esto se trata de libertad, y que necesitamos que en este momento el paso inmediato Después pueden venir otros, pero el paso inmediato tiene que ser que el gobierno de los Estados Unidos facilite el Internet, el Wi-Fi, para que entonces ese pueblo que está en las calles no sea masacrado y nadie se entere, porque lo que está ocurriendo es de proporciones bíblicas y tenemos que darnos cuenta. Hubo muchos momentos, revoluciones anteriores en otras partes del mundo donde el Internet fue el principio del fin, pero el régimen castrista es muy inteligente y sabe muy bien que puede quitarle el acceso a la comunidad internacional y hacer lo que quieran. No esta vez. Por eso la administración del presidente Biden tiene que decir presente. No estamos hablando ni de republicanos ni de demócratas, estamos todos unidos. Los congresistas federales, la administración demócrata, todos unidos, ayudando al pueblo que está en la calle.
All right. Thanks,
you.
everybody.